I would say believe that you can manifest anything that your heart and your soul are sharing a vision for, and to allow play and trust and stepping out of your comfort zone, but also like bold action to like fiercely go for it, to guide the way, and know that it is 100% possible, and lean into the resistance so that you can process and release it and move
Ooh.
and create what you want.
Oh, I love that. Everyone, welcome to the Awakened Matriarch podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Collarette, transformational coach, author, and proud mama. And I am so excited to welcome this incredible lioness onto the show, Christa Russo. It has been my great privilege and honor to have crossed paths with this incredible woman and have played a part on her incredible journey in a small way as her coach for the last several years. And she was a guest on my previous podcast, Inspire and Empower. And I was excited to invite her on here today so that you get to meet this incredible ray of light who is joining us from California today. So, Christa, thank you so much for taking the time today. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. And it's just like almost like this wild deja vu of the last time we spoke. And I'm really excited for today. And that was a beautiful and powerful meditation.
Yeah, I decided to do that I do that for myself before recording a individual episode, but also I feel with guests, it's so important to like ground into the energy. And as I was sharing with someone else the other day, like my vision for my first podcast was for it to feel as if you were sitting around a fire. And I want to continue like with that vibration on these conversations. And so in the meditation, I invite us to think about 1,000 women sitting around us, because that's my hope that thousands of women will be listening to these episodes, but also it, I feel, reminds me of like the power of speaking up, but also of what we do today can have a ripple effect on others, and like already feeling into that visually, like can set up the ripple for wherever this will land. So I'm glad it was good for you.
It was amazing.
Can we start off can you tell us a little bit about like where you are in your life right now, like quite literally geographically, but also what's been going on? And then maybe we can dive into our story. We're going to be talking about your matriarch journey, but also about motherhood, because that's been a big part of it. And so much has happened since we first started working together, which was probably 7 or so years ago.
2018. So
2018.
7 years, yeah.
7 years ago. Oh my gosh. Okay. So I think I had just moved back from Tofino or so. Um, and then we started working together. You were out on the East Coast.
Yep, in
Wanted
Jersey.
to start your coaching business. We got that up
Still
and
working
going.
in corporate at that time.
Okay. So yeah. Well, so tell us a little bit, remind me in case I don't tell the
Yeah,
story,
yeah,
right? About where, our journey started, and take us to where you are today.
So I can't remember exactly how I came across your Wanderlust video, and I don't remember how or where. Like somehow it was like divine, like sent to me. And I remember being in the back of, I don't know where it was, who was driving, but I remember just like listening to your thing and answering the questions that you sent, like the pre questions, and just like having this insane feeling of just like magic. Like I didn't know you, but I knew you, and I knew everything was going to shift. Like there was just already that feeling. And then when for like our first call, I said I wanted to start my own business and quit my job. And I think it was just days after that I got fired from my job. And
Yeah.
it was like, all right, we're in it.
Yeah, that was literally, I remember it was like right before we had a call to set up the
Yeah.
coaching like experience. And you had declared like, well, I want support to like transition out of my corporate life. And I think it was like either the day or like very close to our first session where you got let go. And I was kind of like, okay, well, that got taken care of. So let's set up your coaching. Let's set up your business. I remember that. And
Yeah.
Wanderlust, that Wanderlust the speech, I remember that too. For any of you who might have attended the Wanderlust festivals, oh, they were so much fun, and I had so much fun leading that event. And so I'm assuming it was maybe the YouTube gods or some sort of SEO situation because it was on my blog of the day. And I'm so glad it landed in your life because here we are 7 years later. It's crazy.
Yeah, I know. So wild.
So we were together. So tell us a little bit about what ended up happening in that experience because I feel you've done so many incredible leaps and bounds over the years, and that was one I loved being a witness of, and what you created from it was amazing.
So with that, we just kickstarted the journey to I wanted to start my own business. I wanted to launch my coaching business and be an entrepreneur. And I wanted it to be very connected to nature and just that feeling of magic and be fully alive. And I remember I was saying to you, I was envisioning like 40 women, and I was talking about just sitting around having this like launch party. And I don't remember, somehow you pulled it out and it turned into this vision for a festival, which on the alpaca farm.
Yes, it was. Yes, I remember that farm. Well, it ended up happening there, but that seems so cool with the llamas.
Yep. And then 2 weeks before, we found out that actually he was illegally trying to hold events and he wasn't allowed to. And like the city council had been on vacation or something. And so I remember having tequila with Kate, like in like the darkest hour, being like, oh my God, what are we going to do? And then the whole town just came together and we moved it to Seabright Beach. And it was just like exactly where it was meant to be. And the energy was so powerful and all of the magic. And that was kind of the launch of, the heart of it, the root of it was just creating this experience where I remember one of the questions you asked was kind of that pre-experience. And I remember thinking like, I want people to wake up so excited and terrified. I know that's something you say all the time, right? Where magic is
Mhm.
born. I love that line.
Mhm.
And
When you're both feeling excited and terrified. Yeah, there's
yeah,
magic there. Mhm.
like that's when you know you're in the right space. Um,
Ironically.
yeah, exactly. And I remember having that vision of like, I want people to wake up like terrified and also incredibly excited so that it just cracks them open and they know that they're not coming home the same person that day. Like they're going to have this insane shift within themselves. And I really do feel like that day was that. And then it was also, it was the heart of a launch of my entire career, I feel like, which then turned into private coaching, to international and local retreats, to corporate coaching, to moving to California and working at Golden Door. And just so many different or programs and workshops and so many different ways of kind of pivoting and integrating everything that was born that day. So
Oh my gosh, it was so beautiful to see it unfold. I wish I could have been there. I don't know why we don't live in the same country, but it's not that far, but far enough that I wasn't there. And what you're describing there is often something that I do with people. They want to create a change, and there's so many things we want to do, but often it's focusing in on that one initial project or goal that I often say like it'll catalyze you onto your soul's path. What's that thing that you're going to focus on that will then build that momentum to something else? And what you created was the Moon Sister Rising Festival, so the event had yoga, coaching, dance, I believe. There was music.
yep. It was
And
like
wasn't
primal dance with affirmations. It's called Intensati. And then we had a bonfire and we had like the whole look. One of the biggest pieces that was really beautiful was the action of connecting with the local community and meeting all the businesses. And I remember just grassroots going around, like from where I was in the Jersey Shore to like 2 hours down, just like knocking on all the businesses and like meeting them and building those connections, which was really fun. And friends that I still have today from that experience. And so we had like a lot of the local artisans and local food, and yeah, so it was just a really beautiful day.
so amazing. And you mentioned Kate briefly, and I remember that was also pivotal on your journey because you were mostly doing this on your own initially, but then you had mentioned like I have this woman like that you were kind of thinking about, and I was like, reach out to her.
Yep.
And when
Yeah.
you did, like you guys, I feel that partnership happened pretty smoothly.
Yeah. Oh, she actually, yeah, I had like been kind of, oh my gosh, I love this girl is so amazing. Like almost this like career slash girl crush. And
Yeah.
I when I reached out to her, she was actually on her way home from Mexico, and I think she had just come off of this like witchy retreat and was like, "I had a vision. This is aligned. Like, okay, let's
Wow.
do it."
I mean, it was, and when you had come on the podcast, you had come on with her. She's such a lovely woman, and it was just so beautiful to see what you created. And that's privilege I have as a coach. You get let into someone's life in a very intimate fashion. The conversations you have with clients is something that I hold really dear, because I know, having my own coaches, like, I open up to them in ways that I rarely open up to anyone else. And knowing that that's what's happening when I'm coaching a client is something that I really value, and one of the reasons I love what I do. And then seeing what is created, like, it's so cool to look back and be in awe of what my clients create. Like, there were seeing, like, from one little idea or from this moment where you're like, I want to do this thing, like this vision. And then, now, and what's cool, we're looking back on it like 7 years later.
Mhm.
And I think it's so beautiful. Like, it's still something that, like, I feel it's great to take this moment in right now to acknowledge what you created from there. Cause it's not like it's easier to celebrate it, I think, when you're all this way out, because there's so much work that goes into it. There's like breaking through limiting beliefs. There's hard conversations that have to be had. I remember you were like posting like posters all over, like the requests you had to make. And then also what you ended up, putting into motion from that point. So that's really cool. And then, like you mentioned, so after that event, it kind of really launched you into your coaching and yoga retreat leading career. You were already teaching yoga before we started working together, but you went into corporate coaching. You did those international retreats, which looked amazing, and you moved to California, which is where you are right now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we had kind of a break. Like, we always had like little follow-up sessions in between our initial
Mhm.
experience. And then the year I launched Matriarch, I think you reached out to me or I reached out to you. I don't know how it ended up happening, but bring me back to where you were at that time.
I bought your book.
Oh,
Uh,
yes.
and
Aspiring Mama.
yeah, Aspiring Mama. I bought your book, and it was in April that I started reading it. And I think I'd had like my intention for that year was a lot about home. And in that, like, I remember thinking about like, candles, a record player, and what like that home space would be. But it was also a partner, and I think eventually a family, and it wasn't at the forefront of my mind, because something I really realized in your book was I had so much internal resistance around the possibility of it, right? Like, I was single. I did not feel financially capable of raising a child on my own. There were all these kind of pieces that it was like, oh yeah, this is something I'd like in my life, but it's not something that I think is possible for me right now. And I remember I bought the book in April, and I remember the questions that you asked. Some of them were like, what are you willing to do? And it asked about like in vitro, and it asked about like becoming a single mom, and like all these different questions. And I remember thinking like, okay, I'm willing to be a single mom. And then I also really started to notice my own internal resistance of where I realized I was not allowing myself to have that dream.
Mhm.
And I really think it opened up the seed of I can have this, or it just like really cracked it open. And then you had Matriarch that was going to start, I believe, in June.
Yeah.
Um, right? Yeah, it was in June. So we started to connect, I think, somewhere in April or May, and then I kind of took the next leap, and I was like, okay, I'm signing up for this. And I know if I take the leap, like something beautiful and big is going to get birth out of this. But I signed up to launch my life coaching training. So no visions of at all of wanting to launch a baby.
And I love this, because this is part of the core aspect of Matriarch was similar to the work we had done one-on-one, that core essence of helping someone bring a project to life. And there's a build up to that. And, the overarching theme of Matriarch is helping women reclaim their power, share their gifts, and create a life that is in alignment with their true nature. Because it's one thing to set up goals. It's another thing to enjoy the process in a way that feels nourishing and aligned with who you really are. And that, to me, is really important to support women in doing, because a lot of women I work with, they've accomplished a lot. They've done a lot, but they're at a point in their life where they want to do it in a way that's more sustainable, and also respect themselves and learn how to set and enforce boundaries, but then also to like focus in on what we really want. And I know, even for myself, I'm like, do I have to often check in and be like, what do I really want? Because as you just highlighted with reading Aspiring Mama, you're like, there's things that were blocking yourself from allowing yourself to have the dream of motherhood. Right. And that's hard to break down ourselves because we get comfort in our discomfort. I know I have. And one of the reasons I often get support, I was just telling you that I'm going to Tony Robbins next week, like I'm constantly investing in support for these containers. So needless to say, in the Matriarch program, you did come in with a more professional aspiration. You're like, I'm going to reignite my coaching business, take it to the next level, which is something we had done initially together. So we knew it was something that could be done. And you had already talked to me about this program that you wanted to launch into the world. But one of the things and that you were starting to see too, as we were embarking on the journey of the Matriarch program, was in your visioning work, either the ones we were doing in the group or individually, there was a lot of visions around partnership and family and pregnancy. And I was like, this seems to be like coming up.
Barefoot, naked, and pregnant on a farm with a van
Yes.
every time I close my eyes.
Oh yeah, the van. Yeah, the van was a big part
Van.
of it. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I should have taken the call in the van today.
yeah, you got an epic van. So tell us a little bit about what happened. What ended up happening? I came in
So
with the goal to create your coaching program, which we'll talk about eventually, but what ended up happening?
yeah, so I every time we started off with the vision work, and it was incredibly amazing. I feel like your meditations just like transport me somewhere else. They're so powerful. And every time I closed my eyes, I was barefoot, naked and pregnant on a farm. There was a van, and and I resisted that for at least half of the program, almost half or almost half of the program. And I remember you just kind of kept nudging of like, okay, but are you sure? Like, not in telling me what I should be choosing, but kind of really holding me accountable for what my vision, like what this project is going to be. And then I think maybe halfway through or somewhere around there, like I finally cracked and was like, okay, this is my project. It is a baby. And
Yeah,
a
because I think a lot of us aren't in our generation of women who want to have children or start a family. One, we're not necessarily guided to really reflect on what that might look like.
Mhm,
And then even less so when we want to make it a priority in our lives, supported to celebrate that. The
mhm.
same way we might celebrate another goal like launching a career transition or a book or a podcast, like people will be like, great, like cool. But say, I know for me, if I was saying like, oh, I'm prioritizing, I'm like calling in a partner and having children. Now that I'm a single mom, a lot of people are like, yeah, call in your man. Like people around me are like anxious or like, don't be single forever. And I have my moments, but but when I was younger, it was kind of like, yeah, like, shh, don't talk about those things. Like those things work out on their own.
Mhm,
So, and obviously in the work that I'm doing with Aspiring Mama and Matriarch, this is often what happens with some of our deeper dreams and callings is that we need that support to be able to see that what we want is possible and help us break down like the blockages that we're not like our blind spots. And this was sometimes what was happening even in our conversations. It was coming out so naturally, but then when it would come time to be like, okay, now you can own this, it was like, but no, but this doesn't like logically this doesn't make sense. It was, it's like I'm going to focus on this
not
thing.
supposed to be this.
Right, exact. Right. Yeah, and that's a very normal thing that can come up, and because we're used to doing things a certain way, and it did force a different way of being for you, which is also something we talk about in the Matriarch program of like, okay, well, who do I need to be in order to create the space for what it is that I say I want?
Mhm,
And that
yeah.
can be challenging when we haven't ever been that version of ourselves. It's like, well, I've never been a mom, but it was like, let's tap into that and bring that into your life. Which Okay, continue. What ended up happening?
So I remember you had me write a letter. Can I wait, should I share this or not share this?
You share whatever you want.
For all the program. I don't want to give the nuggets of the program away.
Oh, well, there's so many nuggets. I don't think you can give them all away.
Okay. So you had me write a letter to my partner, my future partner, and to my future baby.
Mhm.
And I wrote a letter to Brian. and I said, I think something along the lines, it was like channeling the letter from him. Can't remember if I was writing to him or, yeah, I wrote a letter to him, like just intuitively. And then he channeled a letter back from him. And it was basically like, I love you. And I want you to go off and have a baby and have the best life possible. And like, just like a very loving kind of like, I want this for you. And then I wrote a letter to my baby girl. And then, it was like the vision was already telling me. So fast forward, I think it was the day before our last call, I like called you and was like, I need to talk to you immediately.
Yeah, you were like, "Do you have room for a session like tomorrow?" And I was like, And then what did you write?
And then I wrote, I'm pregnant.
I was like, "Oh shit, yeah, okay, let's okay."
Can you fit me in, please?
So, just to give people a little bit of context, I mean, this didn't happen immediately overnight after you did this exercise, but this is actually a tool I do share in the Aspiring Mama book, and that I just want to quickly highlight here because I find it such a powerful tool that can be applied in many different regards and connects to one of the guiding lights of welcoming divine guidance, which is to write to, say, your future children or the spouse you're calling in or someone quite literally in your life, and welcoming them to respond through you. And one of the first times I did this in a coaching scenario was with one of my clients whose mom had passed away. And I was coaching her shortly after her mom's passing. And there was a coaching conversation we were having. I don't remember exactly what, maybe around her career path. And she was feeling emotional about not having her mom around. And I had her write a letter to her mom, but then ask her mom to respond. And this, I think, is that level. Some people will communicate with maybe people who aren't around, who might have passed, or who aren't like near them, but don't necessarily welcome a response. And that aspect I think is so powerful. And I started doing this myself with my future children. Actually, one of the first times I did it was when I was driving through California. And I like wrote, it's actually in my book where because I recorded it out loud. It was actually like a voice letter to my future children. And I still have moments where I communicate and welcome their guidance, whether it's children or even like clients or someone I would connect with. So I just want to share that that is such like a powerful practice for people to have or to be willing to lean into, whether it's you're wanting to call in a relationship or have children or call in clients and actually, or whatever it is that you want, or maybe someone in your life that you're missing that you can't talk to anymore. An ex is a great person to do this through. If you want to, clear your soul's like contract, you might communicate with them and then have them respond, even though like actual communication might not be appropriate. So I'm glad you brought it up because I do encourage this practice. And it is one that we had done. It's actually not woven directly into the program, but it was in one of our one-on-one sessions because you had done
Yes.
in
Yeah.
conjunction to the group program, the one-on-one. And yeah, you got pregnant
Yeah.
with a baby girl. And this was also interesting because you felt very much called to having a baby girl. And can
Mhm.
you speak, if you're willing, to talk a little bit about Brian's experience? Because as you were going through
Yeah.
this, Brian, who you mentioned him, but you weren't together at the time. But you had written this letter, but then he also was doing his own inner work. You don't have to
Mhm.
share about this if you don't want to, but if you
Yeah,
do,
no problem. So Brian and I had moved out to California together, and then we broke up for a portion. I want to say almost like maybe like a year and a half. We broke up to 2 years, but out of all that time, maybe there was like a total of 3 or 6 months that we didn't spend time, that we weren't hanging out together all the time. And towards, like towards the end of those 2 years, one of the bigger reasons that we didn't get back together was because I wanted to have a baby and Brian didn't want kids. And I knew that on Brian's end, it was more fear based. Like I knew that he would be an amazing dad. And like, I just had this feeling deep down, but I just was, I didn't want to ever pressure him into that. And I was like, I completely respect that. And it's not something that I'd ever want to force you to do. And so there were so many times where we were kind of always like, okay, we need to stop hanging out now because we don't want the same things. I guess technically I was already pregnant at this moment because we had still been hanging out, and he went down to the desert. The desert is like our very sacred space, and went on a mushroom journey and had a vision that I was his family and his soul and his life, and that he had to have a baby with me. And so he literally rushed home, and I say he's sobbing. He says he was not sobbing, but like it was one of those moments. He was like, I need to speak to you immediately. And we drove to the ocean. And we were sitting in his car, and he was sobbing. Like one of those moments. I think the only other time was when he first told me he loved me, that I really like. It's not that I've never seen him cry other than that, but where you could like see his soul coming through. And he said, you're my family, and I need to have a baby with you. I had a vision. And it happened to be on October 1st, I realized after, which was our 2-year anniversary. Or I guess technically would have been our 2-year anniversary. And so we ended up getting back together that night, and kind of setting out on that journey. And it was a couple days later, maybe like 2 or 3 days later, I found out I was pregnant.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it was very much, I feel like this divine cocoon in every essence. And you truly were like such a large piece of that. You were the guide that allowed it to crack open. I really believe it was through those steps and removing that resistance and like stepping into this work that opened up that space within myself to receive. I don't know if I didn't do that program, if I would have had a baby. Like I really think that was the cocoon that allowed myself to have that. So
Wow.
thank you.
Oh, that's amazing. And I mean, you did the work, and you showed up. It takes a lot of courage to say yes to these experiences, because often when a program like this comes into someone's life, as exciting as it might look, most of the time we say yes because there is something deeper that we're wanting to experience, and
Mhm.
that it can be a defining moment in our lives. And so it takes a lot of courage. So I really want to acknowledge you for that, because you were like you there's a part of us that knows, like, you're like, something's going to happen, but there's a lot of unknown. And even me as the guide, like, I created this framework knowing very well that there's greater magic that happens because of the container that's created that isn't in my control. I'm there to facilitate and allow that to happen, or at least that's part of my philosophy as a coach, is that I'm not just here to like dictate a result,
Mhm.
um, but like co-create it with you and everyone else, but also with these bigger forces that are at play. It's like we're all working together here, because otherwise, if it was just about the result, I'm like, yeah, the coaching program was a great project. I could have just been like, okay, great. Like, let's shut off this other vision that's coming through,
Mhm.
because that one does have more complexities, let's say. Um, but my commitment is to make sure that we're saying yes to what seems to be lighting up that inner fire, not just going down the path. It's like, yeah, that makes sense logically. Let's create this coaching program at this time when like some energy is really present in this area.
Mhm.
And that's something that a part, I guess, of me staying in integrity with the work that I feel called to do is sometimes going down these paths. It's like, we might need to go down this one here. You said you wanted this. And this often happens with people who come to me, they want to do some career upheaval, but then we look behind the curtains and it's like, we might need to like look at this first. And that's going to add fuel to everything else. Maybe
Mhm.
not right away, but in due time. And interestingly enough, like you were talking at the beginning of our conversation, you're like, oh, this now feels like the right time for the coaching program. So
Mhm.
where are you at with that? Like now, okay, so maybe, or let's talk about that, and then let's talk a little bit about your experience as a mom.
Yeah. So I think, and this kind of ties into my experience as a mom, because we were kind of talking, and we'll kind of, yeah, talk more about this later. But um, this kind of idea, I remember, people would always say, like, oh, your kids are going to teach you so much. And I remember when I first had Solana, I'm like, I'm not learning that much. Like, I'm exhausted, and I'm really not learning that much right now. Where is the lessons? and I would say maybe like month to 2 months ago, I started to really be like, oh wow, I see what she's teaching me. And I think that this idea of I need to be like that highest version of me in order to fully show up for her, right? And it's kind of coming to the space. I remember laying in bed one night and thinking, like, when I was kind of moving into doubt, or getting down on myself, or whatever was showing up at that moment, I was like, if I were to picture her going through this journey right now, like what would I tell her? How would I want her to respond? And I just kind of remember thinking like, I don't have the luxury to play the victim anymore. Right. And I don't mean that in the sense of like, oh, like in this like hard knock kind of way. Like I'm totally about, having compassion and leaning into those moments for our own selves when we're in that space. But I think there was like, she's teaching me that I need to step into something for both me and her. Um, and so I felt like, okay, now is the time. Like I know the coaching journey and putting on this training has always kind of been showing up in my visions. And it was like, it just hit me in like a very big, bold way of like, now, now is the time. So I've been kind of on this journey. I don't remember if that was the question. Was that the
Yeah, yeah,
question?
no, that's great. Yeah, go with it.
So I've kind of just been on this journey now of like, okay, where is this kind of like taking my business into the next level, but really in a space that's fueled with, okay, how do I step into my role as a mother? And what does that look like? And then, I know for me, it's like I always wanted her to be a part of whatever my business is, and like my daily life is she's a part of that. And so, we talked about the visions of being barefoot naked on a farm, and then the farm to table dinner I had drawn. And then, that came into life, and she was just there with me. And
Mm.
so I think those are kind of the places now that are calling.
It's so amazing, and I truly feel that, becoming a mother in the sense of having children really changes the way you want to show up in the world. And, there's a chapter on that in the Aspiring Mama book, because you might have an idea of how you want to work once you have children, but I do feel our children also have a say, even if they're not talking yet.
Mhm.
Solana is how many months now?
8 months.
She's eight
What is
months.
today's date? Today's the 6th.
Yes.
Tomorrow she'll be 8, or yeah, so tomorrow she's 8 months old.
See, it's wild, and I do feel like you change. I often say that like you are newly born when you have a newborn, because it's a defining moment in one's life. Whether someone wants to admit that or not, it's just like there's the time before having children, the time after, and how you're called to show up. What you do might not change necessarily, but how you're going to do it definitely will, I believe, because you have another being that's either quite literally on you while you're doing this, or you're just seeing yourself and your purpose in a whole new light. As you mentioned, like, oh, I don't necessarily have room to be a victim here. Like, I have a responsibility and and someone to do this for. And that question you were leaning into of like, well, how would I want my daughter to show up? I often ask myself, like, what would I tell my daughter to do? Or
Mhm.
what would I tell her in this moment? And then it's like, okay, how do I need to apply that to myself today? And it's easier said than done at times. There's moments where I stay in my stuff and I'm like, oh, I don't really want to show up today. Like even this morning before we started recording, I was like, I had a moment. Like I was having a rough morning. you know? But one of the reasons, like, hey, you gotta work through this or figure out a way. Because I do have someone that I want to be a model for. And that doesn't mean a perfect model, but I want to be the best version of myself that I can be. So I love that she's been there. And I see sometimes on your social media how she's like at a class, and Brian, and like your little family you've created looks very much like your vision that you had not so long ago. It's so amazing.
Yeah, it's wild to see that all like come to life and so quickly.
Mhm.
Um, like that kind of just it was like vision, boom.
So if you look back on your journey, even just like the version of you were before joining Matriarch, what are like three things you would want that version of you to know? Like, what are things that you're like, oh yeah, I would tell this to my younger self, knowing what I know now?
Yeah. I think I would tell my younger self that it's possible, and to really believe. Like I think I had a lot of doubt then, which created a lot of anxiety of something being possible. And I think the heart of that would be to trust yourself. And I think that very much like trust yourself and trust like the divinity of what's happening, right? You might not understand it all. It might not all make sense just yet, but there is a much greater, much greater kind of journey happening at hand that I can't see the whole piece of it yet, and it doesn't all make sense, but to really trust myself and to lean into that. So I definitely think that would be. I think I would tell that version of myself. Gosh, I feel like that is the main nugget because I feel like I did show up, but I think I showed up with like a lot of anxiety at times.
Mm,
Uh, and I really did. Another thing I feel like I would tell myself is to like keep playing,
mm,
um, because that creates just more of the energy of what I was stepping into, and that allows more of that to unfold. The more that I would play, I don't know if this one's right. I was like, it's going to be a lot harder than you thought. The journey of motherhood. I don't know if
that's
I tell my
okay.
though.
You're like, do I want to tell? You know what? I actually think that that's okay. Like, 'cause, um, as much as I'm someone who is like being positive and like the best is yet to come, I also think it's good to embrace like the challenges in life. And I feel that's one thing with motherhood and a lot of women I've worked with is that they've underestimated what it takes
Mm,
and feel really, really challenged once a baby comes because they haven't been exposed to certain realities of, let's say, taking care of a newborn, or the impact that might have on you physically. And so I think that's like actually a good thing because I feel this opens up conversations. At least that's something I want to invite women to have is like talk to one another of what it actually takes. You know, motherhood isn't what it looks like on Instagram most of the time, you know. Like there's a lot of stuff that you just don't want to post on there, you know. Not only the parenting aspect of it, but just your whole transformation physically, emotionally, societally, like financially. There's so much in it. So sometimes we don't wanna hear it. I agree, like, it could be like, "Do what I wanna tell?" Like, is it better to have blind faith? Like, it's a tough one, you know, to I think but if that's something you would tell your younger self,
I
maybe
think I would tell her that, but that like it's worth it and you can handle it. Like almost in the sense
yes.
like this journey is cracking you open in such an like massive way, and that from that cracking there's going to be this really beautiful rebirth coming through, and I think I'm still in the cracking. Like I think the rebirth is like really building up underneath the surface, but I also think I'm still very much in that cracking of finding out who I am as a mother. Um, and to, yeah, to, that's where I think all like the trust comes in that like it's all unfolding. Um, but it's hard,
For
but
sure.
totally worth it.
You know, it's children or babies grow exponentially in their first year, and so I truly believe that parents both do, mothers and fathers, and mothers, the thing is physically there's a huge impact on us having carrying a child and like what that entails. So it's something I often tell people, it's like that first year like you're also transforming, and we're in a society that really tries to rush people back to how things were, where it's like you can't go back, or at least I don't believe that. It's like why would I challenge myself to go back to a version of myself that just no longer is? It doesn't mean there aren't aspects of her that are still coming along, but there's a whole new rebirth here. And
Mhm.
we often also talk about how the first 5 years of a child's life are so important. So I like to like reflect it back to yourself as a parent. It's like, oh, these first 5 years are also like huge in your own expansion, in your own growth. Now you might have more children, but this first child is also such a catalyst for change. And I think any additional children, if they do come, will also be. I mean, that's part of my belief and my how I kind of see it. And like my daughter's about to turn 5 in May, and it's like, whoa! I'm like looking back, and
I
so much has
gotcha.
happened in the last 5 years, and gone like that. There's moments that feel like forever, but I've changed so much. Like I look back at just the other day, I was doing this reel and I was looking at videos from the moment she was born to like today, and so much has changed, not only in her but in myself. So I feel that you're still, like you say, you're in that cracking. You're like 8 months out of bringing her into the world, and there's so much beauty still ahead.
Mhm. Yeah. Wow. I can't believe it's been 5 years. Like I remember when she was born.
I know, it's crazy. It's crazy. I'm like, "You're gonna be 5." Like, every moment has like, such beauty in it, but I definitely I'm feeling this one is feeling it feels big. It feels big. I'm curious to dig a little bit about what you mentioned around trust. When it comes to trusting yourself, and if you wish the younger version of you trusted herself more, what are practices or signs that you connect to that are a reminder to trust yourself? Are there things that you experience that are like, "Oh, yeah, this you should trust?" Or are there practices that you do that help you trust yourself? Because it's one thing to say, like, "Okay, trust yourself more,"
Mhm.
but what do you do to do that? Like, how do you actually trust yourself?
So I feel like there's a few different ways. Stepping out of my comfort zone is really one of the ways that I like to like really build that kind of foundation for it. Like I think for a long time surfing has been a way that I build trust in myself because it's like I'll go out on the days and it's like, okay, sometimes my mind is like, we should be out there. And it's more of like the ego saying, like, you should be able to surf that. And my body's walking in the water. And then, or all of a sudden, like it starts, my mind is like, no go. And then all of a sudden my body's backing out. And then there's other days where it's like, my mind is terrified and my body is like, it's going like, and then it's the most beautiful surf session.
Mm,
And I think that it's one of those moments that I'm out of my comfort zone with something that's intentionally aligned with my heart. So that if it's going to shake me up in a way that is also connected to my heart and my soul, I'm going to get to know myself and therefore trust myself and trust my journey through that. So I think it's all the ways of, like even the other day, I was exhausted. I was having a really hard day. It was kind of one of those. I was like, I haven't had enough time for myself, and I was kind of all over the place, like a lot of, like ping ponging in my brain.
mhm.
Um, and my sister invited me to go to Breathe to Grace, which is this place that's like a cold plunge, hot tub, sauna like circuit. And I was so tired, and Brendan's like, just go. You're gonna feel better. And I think for me, even that day was like stepping out of my comfort zone to go and cold plunge when I'm exhausted and like the thought of driving was like a lot. So I think it's different every day, but
Mm,
I think all the ways that like can shake up that energy, and also through meditation, I would say.
mm.
Like how it takes a lot of courage, I think, when I'm holding on to control, like in my mind, or I'm on the mouse wheel or here, there, and everywhere trying to hold all the hats. And then it takes that courage to let go of that and drop back into my heart. And I know that's the space where the journey unfolds and where it shows me like that inner compass, like, okay, this is your next step. But it takes trust to do that.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing because I do feel, there are ways to practically tune into trust, right? And to find those for ourselves. And I love this idea of stepping out of your comfort zone and like using that as a tool
Mhm.
to develop the trust muscle, the self trust, and seeing like where in my life do I already naturally feel that and how can I transpose that maybe in other areas. Slowing down, meditation, as you shared, like I agree with that. Like often when I'm feeling all over the place or when I'm feeling busy, that's actually when I need to stop and be like, okay, slowing
Yeah.
down will actually help me speed up, or go at the right pace instead of trying to be all over the place, which is hard sometimes because there's so much to do. But it's like letting go of the doing and being like, I need to come back to my center so that what I do it with an intention. Again, it's a practice. So I wanted to just dig into that. And let's do the same for play. You know, how you mentioned like having that playfulness is really important. How do you keep that alive in your life today? Or what are certain practices that you do to stay in that energy with what you're experiencing in your life, but also what you're creating?
I think that one is more complicated these days, but I would say one piece that I've been bringing in is the time blocking that we did,
Mm,
which really helped me to
I
reset
love
on
time blocking.
because I think it's a harder one with, wearing all the hats. It's a harder one to find time for. And I remember like when I would coach moms before I had a child, and I'd be like, no, you can always find time. And now I'm like telling myself, I'm like, wait, but you can always find time, right? Um,
Uh-huh.
and so really needing to be like intentional about this is just as important as, a work call or changing my daughter's diaper because I'm going to be able to show up in a different way. And how do I hold myself accountable to actually block that out so that it does happen? So I think there's the one piece of like making it happen and holding myself accountable, which
Yes.
is a journey. I'm not perfect at it. And then I think also, like just coming up with the ways that for me it's surfing, it's yoga, it's going and blocking out time and journaling and making a fire on the farm. Yeah, just really thinking about the things that make us come alive. I've been getting this like itch to want to travel. So we're heading to Kauai next month, which I'm really
Woo!
about
So
that.
oh my gosh,
Uh,
I have a big photo of Kauai on my vision board. I have to go. That's so exciting.
yeah, end of April trip. Happy birthday.
That's amazing. And
Yeah.
I love that, I love that session in Matriarch. We talk about soulful productivity. And one of the concepts is creating a structure that flows, and sometimes we feel that play should just kind of happen naturally, but we need to create a structure for it and make room for these things that nourish us and take care of us, whether it's meditation or like I'll schedule in like my beauty, and one of my things that I really love is adding emojis to my calendar because it makes it more fun. But realizing that when I block out time for whether it's food prep or groceries or even, after our call, I'm bringing my dog to the vet. But after that, I'm going to buy like some birthday presents for a birthday party we have this weekend. And like scheduling that in allows for me to have more fun in my day to day because one, my mind is relaxed when say I'm doing my yoga practice because I've already devoted time to it.
Mhm.
And like you
Mhm.
say, like when you're a mom or when you're just you've got more things in your life, I also feel a big part of it is saying no to so much more than you think you can handle. Like even when I do my top time blocking every single week, there's some things that I've time blocked for them like, oh, I either underestimated or overestimated how much time this would take. And I'm moving things around. It's a constant puzzle piece because
Mhm.
there's unexpected things that I expect also. It's like, okay, let's plan out this ideal, knowing that things are going to shift. At least that's how I roll. Cause I'm like, if I just try to stick to like a non negotiable plan, I would not be sane. But I love having the structure because there's room. Like even my evenings I block out and I call them fun evenings with my daughter when she's here. And in that, there's a little description. Like there's usually a dance party. There's just the way, like there's just an energy in what I've scheduled. So, I mean, there's so much we could talk about, but I love that that came up because I think it's really fun. And in prioritizing play, it's in our nature and I feel our children, I know for me my daughter is such a teacher of that. She just wants to have fun and
Mhm.
I feel if that's a priority in their childhood, I feel it should be a priority in this season of parenting because it's like, wait, if playfulness is really like key in childhood, then it should be in parenthood as well. Because we
Mhm.
can't, like as you said earlier, you want to be a model for your daughter. Well, then that needs to be a priority, and realizing that hey, play is important. Like weaving into whatever it is, whether it's like I watch Survivor while I fold my laundry. Like that to me makes it fun. I also love like folding the clothes that, you know, makes us feel good. But anyway, so thank you for sharing that because I think it's important.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that into my life.
Yeah, and like I wish you were wearing one of your fabulous hats because you do
I was
literally wear
going
many
to.
hats.
I was going to wear my hat, and then I was like, "Ooh, just got my new haircut a few weeks ago."
You do have your beautiful hair. I did all my hair, but then like I said, my garage door wasn't working today, so I went out and like the rain kind of, messed it all up. But that's okay. I like my pony. Got my pony. Anyway, Krista, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. Where can people find you?
People can find me on Instagram. It's Christa Russo _. And then on my website, christarusso.com, or by email, hello@christarusso.com.
Amazing. I will link all of those in the show notes. And before we wrap up today, is there one thing you would want people to take away? Imagine, people could only listen to this final minute of the episode. Thinking about a woman and perhaps that we envision in the meditation starting off, what's a message you would want to share with women who are on their journey to awakening the matriarch within? What's like something you want them to take away?
I would say believe that you can manifest anything that your heart and your soul are sharing a vision for, and to allow play and trust and stepping out of your comfort zone, but also like bold action to like fiercely go for it, to guide the way, and know that is 100% possible, and lean into the resistance so that you can process and release it and move
Ooh.
and create what you want.
Oh, I love that. I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. This is so beautiful.
Oh, well, we will have you back.